It's my honor now to introduce to you a teacher and leader in our community who really needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. Rabbi Gary P. Zola, PhD, is now Emeritus Executive Director of the Jacob Rader Marcus Center of the American Jewish Archives and the Edward M. Ackerman Family Distinguished Professor of the American Jewish Experience and Reform Jewish History at the historic Hebrew Union College. Dr. Zola is a prolific scholar and writer and teacher. He recruited an entire generation of rabbis who now serve our North American Jewish community and beyond. Rabbi Zola has raised rabbis, guided a city, led a college, inspired our country. He has served administrations of this country in their pursuit of understanding of the Jewish community and our contributions to our great nation. But most of all, he stands as a beacon of truth and fact and integrity in our community, our city, and our world. It is really our congregation's great privilege on this day when we welcome a new year, our bicentennial year, that we have the opportunity to learn from Rabbi Zola's wisdom. And I am so very privileged as his student to welcome him now to this pulpit in front of the congregation that he joins so often and uplifts in so many ways. Thank you and welcome to Rabbi Gary Zola, PhD.
Well, Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova, everybody. Thank you so much, Rabbi, for such a warm and kind welcome. I think your rabbi knows how proud I am of her. Well, friends, there's a lighthearted story that is told of a spunky grandmother who visited her local library on a weekly basis to check out a new history volume to read. After following this same pattern for many, many years, one day the lady approached the checkout counter and, instead of handing over her customary historical novel, she placed a copy of a popular romance novel on the desk. And the well-meaning librarian smiled and said, "Mrs. Smith, I am very surprised by your choice this week. I thought you preferred history to romance." And without missing a beat, the matriarch smiled and retorted, "Young man, at this point in my life, the subject matter in this book is history." Well, this hopefully humorous yarn reminds us, as we heard last night from our rabbi, that memory and history are inexorably linked. The impulse to retrieve and preserve the past is a foundational aspect of the human psyche. For memories help us to form our identity, and personal reminiscences orient us by providing us with a sense of continuity and belonging. Indeed, without a sense of the past, we lose our moorings and our sense of inner security. And what is true for individuals certainly applies to a community at large. And that is why the unforgettable Jacob Rader Marcus, the founder of the American Jewish Archives, the first American-born scientifically trained scholar, to devote himself to reconstructing the history of American Jewry, memorably said when expressing this idea, "A people that is not conscious of its past can have little hope for its future." So this morning, we will spend a few minutes reflecting on the history of this venerable congregation. This new year, 5784, marks, as we have heard again and again, the bicentennial anniversary of KK Bene Israel. Now, friends, any American synagogue that has existed for 200 years is entitled to think of itself as one of the historical big boys in America. And in all seriousness, only 8, possibly 9, Jewish congregations in all of American history are older than your congregation. Tiftach Sefer Zichronot Ume'elav Yikare. Over the 10 days of awe, the high holy days, we Jews contemplate and reflect on the past in the hope of making our way to a better future. And we strive to improve our own personal lives, but at the same time, we are also always searching for that inspirational light that will fortify our determination to repair a broken world. And, friends, we must surely agree that our world today seems desperately in need of reparation at this point in time. So on this Sabbath morn, on this New Year morn, let us this morning consider 3 of the many Jewish communal challenges we face at the dawn of 5784. And history always provides us with a perspective on the present. And so as we dip into Rockdale's 200-year history, let's see if we can uncover lessons that will furnish us both with a timely and a timeless lesson that should motivate us and fortify us as we together confront the unscrutable and daunting future that lies ahead. First, there can be little doubt, friends, that the precipitous rise of anti-Semitism in America is one of the most troubling communal concerns for each and every one of us here today. Every time we enter a synagogue, whenever we attend a Jewish communal event, the ubiquitous presence of security reminds us that even after 200 years of vibrant Jewish communal presence here in the so-called New World, there are still hateful people in this city, in this nation, and around the globe who are filled with an implacable hostility and prejudice toward us. Now, many here this morning are vaguely familiar with the name Rabbi David Phillipson. Rabbi Phillipson assumed this pulpit as a 26-year-old in the year 1888, and he remained here at Rockdale for 61 years. Most people who are familiar with Rabbi Phillipson's name tend to associate his entire rabbinate with his uncompromising insistence that Judaism was only a religion without any national consciousness. And until his death in 1949, Phillipson refused to support the Zionist cause. And his dogged allegiance to this ideology has left him on the wrong side of Jewish history, certainly regarding the rebirth of the Jewish state. And yet, there is much more to the story of Dr. Phillipson's remarkable rabbinate at Rockdale than only his anti-Zionist ideology. On Yom Kippur, you will have an opportunity to study with Professor Saracen, my colleague, and learn about his liturgical contributions. Second, he understood the importance, the significance of preserving this congregation's history. As a young rabbi here, he had the foresight to preserve the congregation's history. He interviewed many of the congregation's founding members who were still alive when he was in his early years. And the historical essays he published in 1894 to mark the 70th anniversary of this congregation, the first time such an anniversary was marked in a significant way, has left all of us fascinating details from the nativity of this synagogue and of Cincinnati's Jewish life in general. Third, Rabbi Phillipson was an outspoken activist in the pulpit. Few recall this. Phillipson never hesitated to speak out on controversial issues, even if his congregants winced and flinched from time to time. So during the 1930s, we know that anti-Semitism surged in the United States, and it surged around the globe. And Phillipson's sermons, often reproduced in the Inquirer, testified to the fact that your rabbi spoke out with bravura to denounce anti-Semitism and the dehumanization of the Jew. In 1926, Phillipson made national news when he refused to dine with Queen Maria of Romania because of her nation's bitterly cruel treatment of its Jewish community. And with the rise of anti-Semitism in the 1930s, Phillipson was appalled, and he repeatedly preached to the congregation to fight back vigorously against anti-Semitism. The best and the most effective answer to anti-Semitism, Phillipson admonished, and the best and the most effective answer to every narrow bigotry that still stalks among us and shames the best traditions of free America is to struggle bravely against all un-American endeavors and to battle on unafraid in the cause of universal freedom, brotherhood, and peace. Here, friends, is an admonition from our congregation's past that still speaks directly to us today on the first day of 5784. Indeed, we owe it to our children and to our children's children to battle on unafraid in a fight for what Phillipson correctly described as the best traditions of a free America. Tomorrow, friends, go home and open your computers and search for the Anti-Defamation League's excellent document titled Anti-Semitism, 90 Ways You Can Respond. There you'll find a long list of everyday tools to combat anti-Semitism in the course of our day-to-day lives. Rabbi Phillipson was correct. It is up to each of us to battle on unafraid. And we do that for the sake of the noble ideas enshrined in this nation's founding documents. Now, American Jews are also facing a second vexing concern. Most of us are deeply worried about the current state of American democracy. According to a new poll just conducted by the Associated Press and the National Opinion Research Center in Chicago, hard to believe, but it is the results of the survey, only 1 in 10 United States adults will give high ratings to the way democracy is working in the United States, or how well it represents the interests of most Americans. The same poll also indicated that 53% of Americans say that Congress is doing a bad job of upholding democratic values. Only 16% surveyed believe that Congress is doing a good job. But perhaps the survey's most troubling finding is that almost half of America, 49%, say democracy is not working well in the United States. Only 10% say it is working extremely well, and 40% say it is working somewhat well. During the last decades of the 19th century and into the early years of the 20th century, American democracy was facing similar criticism. It's a long story, but locally, the so-called political machines that produced the spoil system of politics, they had a chokehold on the major metropolitan areas. That included, friends, Cincinnati, Ohio. So corruption and unscrupulous behavior surged in local and national government. And faith at that time in democracy was on the wane. One of the key figures in reforming government during those years was right here in Cincinnati, and a prominent, lifelong member of this congregation, Mayor Murray Seasongood. Now, Seasongood repeatedly contended that the source of his reforming moral compass was his unrelenting commitment to good government and a direct outgrowth, that his unrelenting commitment to good government was a direct outgrowth of the Jewish education he received at Rockdale Temple. Seasongood believed that the best way to remedy the illnesses of the national government was by reforming local government, which could be accomplished with the help of an informed and highly motivated public. His addresses on this topic repeatedly reveal the influence of his Reform Jewish heritage, and he always emphasized Judaism's ethical legacy. Seasongood's admonitions, written now almost 100 years ago, are stunningly relevant to today. Quote, "What we need," he wrote in 1934, "is an aroused conscience and an aroused sense of responsibility toward local government." He continued, "The cities must no longer be made the playthings of national parties. It will be the ruination of the national parties if they are allowed to be such. The cities and the counties must come into the place which is rightfully theirs, and it can be done if you have determined citizenship that is intent upon bringing about better conditions in the locality in which they live." Close quote. Seasongood's speeches on democracy and government were always peppered with Hebrew scriptures, quotes, of course always in English. "The struggle for civic ideals put into practical operation," he wrote, is worthy of the greatest devotion and self-sacrifice. Then he says, paraphrasing Exodus, let none hang back and ask, am I worthy or capable of so large a task? And then quoting Kings, he added, let him inquire, what can I do to help? It is the duty of those who have had the best educational advantages to become such leaders for civic as well as for national righteousness. Friends, a few years ago, the Pew Research Center conducted a survey that suggested the American public still largely agrees with Mayor Seasongood's basic premise on the importance of a public, strong commitment to democratic values expressed locally. He would counsel us today to work, all of us, side by side with our neighbors here in Cincinnati and in Southern Ohio for the betterment of the common weal, which will ultimately have an effect on the nation. Friends, this morning we have time just to briefly mention one additional concern. Sociologists and learned observers have noted that the American synagogue is presently navigating treacherous shoals. There are many factors that have contributed to the enervation of the synagogue and liberal Judaism in particular in America today. To name some of them, younger generations of Americans are increasingly more secularized than previous generations. Belonging to the synagogue and particularly funding Jewish education have become increasingly economically prohibitive in recent years. The post-COVID phenomenon of live streaming and virtual participation have affected synagogue programming and membership and the spirit of synagogue community. Statistical surveys suggest that fewer Jews today are interested in specifically, particularly Jewish causes. Jewish social networks, Jewish associations, organizations, institutions, which play a pivotal role in fostering a sense of Jewish belonging, have become increasingly frayed. And yet, there is even another worrisome sign, and that is the stunning decline in applications to rabbinical school throughout the non-Orthodox Jewish community. This is one of the most unsettling, though little mentioned, concerns. It is difficult to imagine, friends, how Jewish life can continue to flourish without learned teachers, interpreters of our literary tradition and our remarkable heritage. Yet, it seems that over the course of the coming decade, many American synagogues across this nation will be increasingly hard-pressed to find well-educated, articulate, dynamic rabbinic leaders. And that which just transpired at the historic rabbinical school in Cincinnati ensures that our own community, Cincinnati, will feel this shortage sooner and more acutely than other communities. Now here, Bene Israel's bicentennial anniversary can once again offer us a truly important lesson. Enduring for 2 centuries requires more than good luck. The entire story of this congregation's history may be summed up as follows. Rockdale's history is an unending, continuous saga of daunting challenges followed by adaptive responses. Period. End of story. Three factors have continuously characterized those adaptive responses. One, leadership, both lay and rabbinic. Two, innovation. And three, an unflagging, unremitting commitment to the future of Jewish life in Cincinnati, in Ohio, in this nation. And all the difficulties just mentioned in the past 20 minutes can provoke inspiring responses with the application of those three qualities. Now consider, for example, as an example, the history of women in this congregation over the generations. Louisa Simmons, one of the founding members of this congregation, organized the congregation's first mixed choir in the 1830s. Her purpose was to make worship more appealing and beautiful. It was this same woman who helped to organize the synagogue's first religious school in the same decade. Stella Freiberg, of the famous Freiberg family, was the president of what we call today Women of Rockdale in the early 1920s. And in her report to the sisterhood, she describes the role that women were playing in the revitalization of Rockdale's religious life. This is what she writes. The woman has at last found her niche in religious life. Her voice is heard on temple boards. Her advice is asked in the direction of the affairs of the Sabbath school. She is, in fact, a force in our religious community. In 1975, Women of Rockdale assembled and published one of the most popular Jewish cookbooks in all of American Jewish publishing. And that cookbook, which we heard about several times this morning in the beginning, drew national attention to this congregation in 1975 and has still, to this day, is helping to fill its coffers. And it was Rockdale Temple. I think this is the 30th time we've heard this. The oldest congregation west of the Alleghenies that chose to elect Rabbi Sissi Koran of blessed memory to this pulpit in the year 2004, making her, at this congregation, the first woman in southern Ohio to lead a major Jewish congregation and enabling this congregation to respond at that time and to reimagine itself once again. Leadership, innovation, and an unflagging commitment to the future of Jewish life in this community. These are the characteristics that our forebears have given to us. They are a roadmap for the future. This bicentennial proves conclusively that these three characteristics can produce a response to any challenge we face if we will it. If we will it. With this inspiring roadmap in hand, we can be confident, friends, that in the year 2124, this historic congregation will be marking its tercentennial celebration, and on that fine day, it will be my high privilege to address you once again. Friends, the sages of yore debated what kind of shofar should be sounded on the high holy days. And they decided that on Rosh Hashanah, we should use the small, curved, bent ram's horn that would remind us at the beginning of the holiday of our shortcomings, our imperfections, the spiritual challenges which we all face. Yet, in the Sugya, in the Talmud, in the debate, Rabbi Yehuda taught at the end of the 10 days, when the Tekiah Gedolah is sounded, at that time, at the close of Nila, we must use the straight, forward-pointing, unbending, unswerving shofar that comes from the antelope. And thereby we send a message to all of us that we should move forward from these days with confidence and self-assurance. As the Proverbs teaches us, Yesh acharit v'tikvatcha lo tikaret. There is hope for our future. Of this you may be certain. It was Mary Anton, an Eastern European Jewish immigrant and a best-selling American novelist at the dawn of the 20th century, who captured the essence of this entire message in one elegant and succinct turn of phrase. She wrote, "It is not I that belong to the past. It is the past that belongs to me." Toward this goal, toward this important objective, let us resolve to build anew. Tichle shana v'kilaloteha v'tachel shana uvirchoteha. May hurt and heartache leave with the year that has ended, and may a new year of blessing and bounty and bicentennial begin for one and for all. V'chein yehi ritzono. Amen.